Hello everyone, and welcome to my podcast. Today, I want to talk about the highly sensitive child who grows up to become a highly sensitive person. And usually, when we think of someone who is highly sensitive, we think of it as a negative thing, as a weakness. And parents don't want their children to be weak. They want them to be strong and capable of handling life's challenges. So when we feel that they are weak and crying all the time, we get triggered. And some might scream at them to make them stop. In other words, they are asking them or making them suppress their emotions and show strength instead. Show that they are okay. Meanwhile, they are not. This happens a lot with boys. Parents of boys, and especially dads, tend to scream and sometimes hit their boy to make them seem stronger. And many times this happens subconsciously because this is how they were raised, if not worse. But that's not what boys need. We need to be more aware of what this is doing to the boys who grow up and become emotionally unavailable men because they suppress their emotions. This is not only true for highly sensitive boys, but also boys who do not have the qualities of a highly sensitive child. But for highly sensitive boys, it's even worse because they are even more emotional than other boys. So I'm here to tell you that being highly sensitive is not a weakness, it's a strength. We just need to understand it to help guide our children and ourselves through it. So in this episode, I'll be listing the qualities of a highly sensitive child as per the book The Highly Sensitive Child by Elaine Aron and help guide you in handling it so that they eventually become strengths. Now, highly sensitive children are seen as shy, as introverted. Although, as adults, 30% of highly sensitive people are actually extroverted. So you can be extroverted and highly sensitive at the same time. But yes, most are introverted. They are seen as being slow to warm up and sometimes simply as fearful. They just seem afraid. But there is more to it. Elaine explains this trait as having 4 aspects. She says that all 4 aspects are present in highly sensitive individuals, but not all the details of each need to be present to fulfill that aspect. I know it's a bit confusing. You'll understand more as I go. So she uses the acronym DOES, D-O-E-S, to make it more memorable. So the first, D, stands for depth of processing. What does that mean? It means that your child takes their time to thoroughly process information, and they have a tendency to reflect on things that happen around them. How do you know if your child processes things in such depth? Well, it shows up in your child's deep questions. They ask you questions that are surprising. Like you think, what are they thinking about to ask such questions? They also tend to use big words for their age after they hear them maybe once or twice. And they have a clever sense of humor. They also face difficulty in making decisions because they think of so many possibilities and different perspectives. So it takes them time. They also seem to be slow to warm up to new people and situations because they have to watch, to observe, and think before joining in. So not all highly sensitive children will demonstrate all these examples, but all will show some sign of deep thinking and processing. Now, the second aspect, O, stands for easily overstimulated. It makes sense, right? A person who is more aware of everything going on outside and inside and who processes things more thoroughly has to wear out mentally and therefore physically sooner than others. And by the way, there is a lot of information that I'm just reading from the book to make sure that I portray the message clearly, okay? So now, how do you know that your child easily gets overstimulated? Well, here the signs are easier to spot. There is the surprising and distressing meltdowns on overstimulating outings, even on fun days and vacations. So the meltdowns. There is the difficulty to go to sleep or keeping waking up in the middle of the night after an exciting day, because there's a lot going on in their heads. There's the reactions to change or pain that seem so extreme. So change worries them. There is so much to think about. And pain seems to hurt more. إنه ما بتاكل هالقد. But for them, it's big. It hurts a lot. Also, they seem almost physically hurt by loud noises. They do not like loud noises. They complain about heat and cold, pebbles an issue, about wet or scratchy clothing. Some are sensitive to certain clothing and they wouldn't wear them. وهيك, generally they complain a lot about things, little things that are bothersome. You learn that they need extra downtime or quiet play, like introverts do. Also, they may not like surprise parties, and to avoid being overstimulated, they may try to avoid all parties and team sports or speaking up in class, anything that, is overcrowded. And when they are good at something, they do not perform nearly as well when being watched or tested. And they learn better from gentle correction than strong overstimulating punishments that would just cause a meltdown. So I relate so much to this because, by the way, I was a highly sensitive child and I am a highly sensitive person. And I remember so many things in my childhood that mirror a lot of this. So regarding the last point, I was a crybaby, as many highly sensitive children are. I would cry on the littlest of things. And I remember there was one time when I was standing in line. I was so young, maybe grade 3 or 4. That makes me around 7 or 8 years old because I started school early. So anyway, I was standing in line and I didn't realize that I was a bit off of the straight line. And I think I was looking backwards. So a teacher comes and talks to me sharply, like, Dana, stand properly in line. She didn't scream, but she was harsh. And I just start crying and crying. And she looks at me like, what the fuck? She didn't know what to do. And she didn't want to break her harsh exterior as a teacher. So she just left me and continued walking to check on other lines. And I just continued crying, I don't know for how long. What I really needed was a gentle approach to correct me. And that would have been tough enough for me because I don't like to make mistakes. And I used to try to be little Miss Perfect, not to be corrected or spoken to harshly or disciplined. But yeah, that was her way. And I have so many other examples regarding these points, but I don't want to give so many examples about myself because then the episode will be too long. And really, it will just be about me. So yalla, next. The third E stands for emotional reactivity and empathy. So emotional reactivity is also closely related to depth of processing, in that our emotions tell us what to pay attention to, learn from, and memorize if necessary. Without emotions as motivators, nothing would be processed enough to remember it. A child wants to remember how to keep warm, engage mom's smile, talk dad into giving them a cookie, or earn a good grade, and how to avoid burnt fingers, angry parents, or bad grades. Sensitive children, because they care more about everything, observe and learn these life lessons even better. One way they do it in social situations quite naturally is by having empathy, which means knowing what the other person is knowing, feeling what the other person is feeling. Now, how does emotional responsiveness and empathy look like? Well, because your child feels everything so deeply, they cry easily. See, it's not just me. They also seem to read your mind. They understand you and how you're feeling easily. They tend to be perfectionists as well, so this relates to my previous episodes. And they react intensely to making the slightest error, aka crying like the world is ending just because you didn't stand in line properly. They also tend to notice the distress of others, including school friends, family members, strangers, sometimes animals, teachers, and so on, because they are very empathetic. They feel other people's feelings, and also because they notice subtleties easily. And this is the fourth aspect. So the fourth one, S, stands for sensitive to subtle stimuli. They are aware of subtle sounds, smells, details, and so forth. So they tend to notice even slight changes in the appearance of people, even in face expressions, like they can tell when you're sad or upset. And they also notice changes in places. They know, like when there's a piece of furniture that has moved or has been removed. They also notice funny odors that make them refuse to enter a place. They notice bird singings, airplane engine in the distance, and any noise and sounds, really. And when they're a bit older, they look at works of art as if they're seeing more than others do. They also notice the tone of voice and changes in it. They notice a glance, a snub, or even a small sign of encouragement. Sensitivity to the subtle helps them in sports, the arts, and school, including sensing what teachers want. I remember at one point, after understanding some of my teachers, I would know what questions they would put in the exams. Not all of them. Some teachers made no sense to me, and I always thought of it as sense, not as being sensitive to stimuli. But anyway, this keen awareness vanishes when your child is over-aroused, as in when they are under pressure or tired or overstimulated or even hungry. That is the nature of any nervous system. It can become overloaded and shut down. Now, how can parents help their highly sensitive children in reaching their potential and using these qualities or aspects as their superpowers? Because yes, they do become superpowers eventually. Firstly, awareness is the first step. Understanding your children and what they are going through helps you in handling them in different situations. Because some parents feel like, what is wrong with my child? Why can't he or she be like other kids? And sometimes they verbalize that to their kids. Mostly when they are frustrated, and it's understood really, because parents have their breaking points as well. But that's really damaging for children because they are already very critical of themselves. So hearing a parent say something like that, a parent, one of the most important people to them, it really highly affects them and their sense of worth and their self-esteem. So if something like this happens, then please repair, correct it. Talk to your child and tell them all the positive things about them and that you wouldn't want them to be anyone else and that you love them just like they are. And that yes, you push them to gain skills and improve because we all need that. And tell them that even you as an adult, you're pushing yourself to gain more skills and become better at, for example, work, at cooking, at parenting, and generally learning new things. This makes them relate to you and feel normal. Now, I don't like to use the word normal because really what is normal to each of us is what we are used to, but I had to use it here. Or we can say that they feel like they belong more. All right? So yes, awareness is the first step. So listening to this podcast is very helpful for your child. Also, feel free to share it with those who are either highly sensitive or have highly sensitive children. We really need to raise awareness more and more. And also, there are so many sources to learn from about this trait. There is Elaine Aron's books, the ones that I'm mentioning here, The Highly Sensitive Child, and there's also The Highly Sensitive Person, and many podcast episodes that would go into more details. Here today, I'm trying to give a general idea on the topic and provide general ways in helping your child thrive. If you have any questions on how to handle any particular situations, then feel free to reach out to me so that we can discuss it in more details and figure out what would work with your child and your household. So, Elaine lists 4 keys to raising a joyous, highly sensitive child. The first key is self-esteem. We need to promote our children's self-esteem whether they are highly sensitive or not. But with highly sensitive children, it's extremely important because they take the littlest of things and have it affect their self-worth, like any criticism, okay? So Elaine first divides self-esteem into 4 kinds or sources. Okay, the first is the most important, and it is the sense of being loved by one or more people simply because you exist, not because of anything else. The second is social self-esteem, which is a sense of being able to make friends, of saying interesting things that gain the respect of strangers, and allows you to lead or speak up in groups. The third is physical self-esteem, which is a confidence about appearance and abilities, about coordination and being able to trust one's body to learn a skill, play a game, accomplish a task, and look as good as other bodies do. The fourth is intellectual self-esteem, a feeling of confidence in your learning abilities, and that one is as good as others in one's own age, at least in some areas. So be mindful of all 4 when you work on your child's self-esteem. Now, how can we promote self-esteem? Elaine mentions 6 ways to do so. 1 is look at yourself. She says that highly sensitive children don't miss much. Actions, including posture, tone of voice, and facial expressions, speak louder than words to these kids. If you feel bad about yourself or them for being sensitive or anything else, they will know. So work on it and change your views. 2 is your words. Your words still count. So speak admirably of your child's sensitivity when it comes up. But of course, don't overdo it as well. 3, spend time with your child. 4, show respect for your child's feelings, needs, opinions, preferences, and decisions. 5, help your child understand themselves in relation to non-sensitive people. Your child needs to learn that many people tend to think out loud and act impulsively without always meaning what they say or intending to have such a strong effect. Okay? 6, bring up strengths when they mention weaknesses. So when your child brings up a weakness or a failing or a failure, start by honoring their feeling, of course, but then mention a similar countering instance that showcases a strength of theirs. So these were 6 ways to improve self-esteem. And now we're going to go into the second key to raising a joyous, highly sensitive child, which is reducing shame. Here again, Elaine writes that you need to look at yourself. Many people were raised by parents who use shaming as the method of disciplining, saying things like, "You idiot, look what you did. Can't you do anything right? You always spill your milk. What will people think?" And so on. And it's amazing how often we find ourselves repeating the words of our parents even when we know how hurtful they were to us. So become as conscious as you can and don't shame your children as you were shamed. Another point is not to emphasize what you expect your highly sensitive child to achieve. You know, some parents go overboard with what they expect their children to become. This puts stress and pressure on the child and makes them feel like maybe they can't measure up, so that leaves them in a deep sense of shame. Thirdly, be careful not to compare between your kids. Focus on each child's strengths instead. Fourthly, be aware of your teasing behavior. Very important. Lastly, make sure that your child doesn't feel as if they are the cause of any family troubles. The third key is wise discipline. So, of course, also highly sensitive children need to learn and have a strong sense of right and wrong. And by the way, highly sensitive children tend to naturally be highly conscientious. So they wouldn't want to do anything wrong in the first place, but they need to learn what's wrong first. So you need to have clear standards of behavior in your family for a given age in a given situation. So for example, standards for 4-year-olds in restaurants. acceptable manners when 10-year-olds meet strangers, and when an apology is required, and so forth. Now, when a standard is not met, here are some basic steps for correcting your highly sensitive child. 1. Consider the state of arousal of your child and yourself. If one or both of you are overstimulated, then calm yourself first and then calm your child. 2. Listen and empathize. 3. Restate your standards, and if your child is old enough, explain your reasons for the standards. 4. Decide whether there should be further consequences. 5. State what your child can do in the future. Now, if you have to use real discipline and not only correction, then 1. Keep the consequences short, mild, and related to the behavior. 2. Be consistent. Unpredictable punishment creates additional anxiety. And 3. With an older child, if the behavior is not going away, try to explore why with your child. Now, the 4th key is knowing how to discuss sensitivity. Elaine writes, many parents wonder whether to discuss with their highly sensitive child this trait of sensitivity with which their child was born. They often worry that a child will feel different or even flawed. Her answer is that she believes that all highly sensitive children notice sooner or later that they are different. What you supply is a positive view of it, and only the details that your child needs at the time. Okay? Don't overshare. If you want, you can wait until the whole subject comes up naturally. The only problem with that approach is that you may want to discuss your child's trait with teachers or other caregivers. If you do this without talking it over first with your child, they will usually sense that you are having special discussions about them, even if these happen out of earshot, and those you have spoken to may mention it or simply change their behavior towards your child. Then your child may imagine the worst, that you are trying to get them help because there's something wrong with them. And they may simply see you as not trustworthy because you have discussed their private life behind their back. So she recommends to talk to the child first before discussing it with others. Now, how to discuss sensitivity with your own child? First of all, any discussion needs to be adjusted to a child's age, so depending on their age. Secondly, be clear that your child is not alone in being highly sensitive and that many others are too. 3. Explain that everyone has different traits that stand out. For example, you see some people who easily get triggered and get angry. 4. When a difficulty arises due to the trait, focus at the time on the solution, not the trait itself. 5. When a crisis demands your child's best effort, do not bring up the trait as a reason for not succeeding. We don't want it to hold them back. 6. Do not use the trait as a weapon during conflicts with your child. As in, you can't go out with your friend because you might get overstimulated and I'm not there to help you. 7. If your child complains about being too sensitive, bring up an example of a time it was an advantage. 8. Be clear about the ways in which you think your child can change and the ways he probably cannot. For example, I'm sure that if you play in front of audiences more, you will relax more. You may never be as relaxed as Paul, but you may enjoy it more. 9. Identify people your child knows and admire who are probably also highly sensitive. And finally, when it comes to talking about your child's sensitivity with others, people who are close with your child, like their teachers, coaches, parents of their close friends and relatives, and really whoever you feel need to understand your child better in order to help further in their development, then tell them about this trait using the acronym DOES, DOES. And also, one last thing, when others label your child as shy, don't agree with them out of politeness, especially in front of the child, because then your child will believe that you see them that way and it would become a part of their identity. You can still respond to those people politely with something like, "Oh no, she's not shy. She just needs to take her time to observe first and then join in." All right, this was a long episode with a lot of information, but I hope that this made you understand your highly sensitive child better and gave you some tips on how to parent them to make them thrive. And of course, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. You'll find me on Instagram at balanced.mindsets, and you can find my number there as well. Oh, yalla, see you next time.